was at the news conference today along with Jonas and CJ and everyone else, and obviously the money quote is the DNA quote, and let's see what that means in action. But I think that was set on purpose, and it came for context. It came right after he talked about his disappointment in Game 5 and Game 7. I also think that he's in a position now to actually do something about it, not just because obviously Marner may force the issue anyway in terms of changing the DNA, but because Shanahan's gone. And listen, on the one hand, Treliving was crushed when Brendan Shanahan was let go. Those two had forged a really close relationship, and I think it took Brad Treliving a few days to get his headspace in the right place because of that. But after meeting with Keith Pelley, and the one thing about where Treliving is now is that this is his team more than ever. And he does not have the loyalty factor to the Shanahan plan or to anyone involved in the past. He can make this team whatever he wants. And forcibly, he's going to have to anyway.
Well, so Pierre, perfect segue. John Tavares, we talked about him earlier in the show, and we all kind of noted that it was a little interesting that when Brad Treliving was asked about it, he didn't definitively say really anything. We want him back. We're gonna Did you find that interesting, or do you just think he is kind of keeping his options and cards, I guess, open?
So yeah, and it's a good question, Jonas. I actually clarified that with Brad Treliving after the news conference, and he did not mean that he wasn't interested in signing John Tavares. What he meant to say, and I guess it didn't come across clearly, is that he does not and will not comment on contract negotiations. So I think he got misconstrued, and I clarified that with him after. He was not commenting either way on where this was headed with Tavares and Marner. So I think Tavares ends up back as a Leaf, but what's happening right now in the offices of the Leafs there at Pro Performance Center will have a huge impact on where this all goes. They've been in pro scouting meetings every day or for a few days, and Treliving was in those meetings before today's news conference. He went back in them after today's, and they're looking at every single possibility around the league. They're putting up trade targets on the whiteboard. They're looking at life after Marner, if that's what happens. They're looking at what number works for Tavares, or if they can't sign him, how to replace him. They're going through all those machinations as we speak. Well, all the four of us around this hit here.
Yeah, so I guess, ultimately the DNA conversation, in your opinion, or based on what you just said, is that simply Marner then? If Tavares is going to come back, then the way the DNA changes is Mitch Marner, and it may not even be their decision. It's that Mitch just wants to leave. So What does that accomplish in the end if, Marner's the only guy that goes and Tavares returns and a lot of the core players are back? I believe you said earlier today Morgan Riley's not going anywhere.
He's not going to waive. Yeah.
He's not going to waive, so I guess they're not even going to bother asking him. Listen, Marner leaving is significant. I'm not downplaying that. If that happens, if he walks, that's huge. He's been here for 9 years. He's a big part of the culture that they've built here. But in your opinion, Pierre, is that enough? Would that basically would that allow you to look back on what Treliving said today and give him the check in the box and say, okay, accomplished that?
I would say let's re-examine this in September when we're all back from shooting 64s every day in our golf case, because I think by the end of these scouting meetings, I think the Leafs are going to have a pretty aggressive game plan. I don't know what it looks like yet because they don't know. They're going through all the machinations right now. I don't think Marner potentially leaving is the only thing. I think the Leafs are getting involved in a lot of trade discussions to try and impact what they have here, is my thought. And again, I think a lot of that is because there's an acknowledgement from Brad Treliving that as improved as this team was this year from last year, I think it really was under Craig Berube, it's still not good enough. And it's, one of the acknowledgments from Treliving today, and I got to be careful I'm not reading too much into it, but I don't know what you guys think. He can't live in the fact that he's only been here 2 years and Craig Berube has only been here 1 year. In the vacuum, losing to 7 to Florida, heck, the Leafs might have ended up giving Florida the toughest step by the time this is all done, these playoffs. Let's see. But that's not what this is about. If that was good enough, ownership wouldn't have fired Brendan Shanahan. This is about 9 years of DNA. to get back to DNA. And I think what Treliving talked about today, to me, was the strongest I've heard him yet, acknowledging the playoff scarring and what transpired before he got here. I think he was worried about going there before because he was new and was trying to gain the trust of these players and so on. I think today he's basically saying, okay, I get it. I'm with you guys on this now.